You want to know what's crazy? I just finished watching the Tupac biopic, All Eyes on Me. I never seen it until just about 2 hours ago, and I just finished watching the movie about maybe 30 minutes ago. And how this ties into what I'm about to talk about tonight is, during that movie, Tupac was a very extremely paranoid dude, especially after he got shot. Rightfully so. But even prior to him getting shot, he always had this sense of fear that the government was watching him, especially when Dan Quayle, Vice President Dan Quayle, went on TV and pretty much called Tupac out for his music. And then his mother told him that he's pretty much a target now. Whether he wants to be a black leader or not, he is in a position of leadership, whether he wants to accept his role or not. And, you know, it's so crazy because after I finished watching that movie, I log on to Facebook and I see a couple people talking about how the FBI is now targeting black people. And they released this intelligence assessment. And I'm going to read to you this intelligence assessment so you can hear exactly what the FBI has put out in an official, unclassified law enforcement document about black people and criminalizing black thought. That's basically the only way I can really describe this. So I'm going to read this to you guys because you guys need to hear this. So the title of this assessment is titled Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers. And this was published August 3rd, 2017. So this is extremely recent, as in 2 months ago. All right. All right. So it goes on to say, executive summary. The FBI assesses it is very likely black identity extremists, which will be the acronym will be called BIE. Black identity extremists' perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. The FBI assesses it is very likely this increase began following the August 9th, 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and the subsequent grand jury November 2014 declination to indict the police officer involved. The FBI assesses it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse against African Americans since then have continued to feed the resurgence in ideologically motivated violent criminal activity within the BIE movement. The FBI assesses it is very likely some BIEs are influenced by a mix of anti-authoritarian, Moorish sovereign citizen ideology and BIE ideology. The FBI has high confidence in these assessments based on a history of violent incidents attributed to individuals who acted on behalf of their ideological beliefs, documented in FBI investigations and other law enforcement and open source reporting. The FBI makes this judgment with the key assumption the recent incidents are ideologically motivated. So they're essentially saying that the few black people who went out there to attack police officers were basically motivated by a bunch of pro-black speakers all over the internet. That's essentially what this is actually saying. And when I say few, I literally mean a few, as the FBI will admit to in this report as I proceed to read on. All right, so we got, what is this at the bottom here? It says the FBI defines black identity extremists as individuals who seek, wholly or in part, through unlawful acts of force and violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society, And some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. This desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either a religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. The mere advocacy of political or social positions, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, or generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute extremism and may be constitutionally protected. So all that's saying is, if you are a black person out there talking this black empowerment talk, how black people need to get their finances together, or even if you're a little bit more extreme where you're talking about black people just need to separate themselves from white people and go back to some old separate but equal type of shit, the FBI is trying to say that, I guess, you have a high propensity of possibly committing violence against law enforcement just for simply thinking that way. Then this thing goes on to say the FBI defines sovereign citizen extremists as individuals who openly reject their U.S. citizenship status, believe that most forms of established government, authority, and institutions are illegitimate, and seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force or violence to further their claim to be immune from government authority. The mere advocacy of political or social positions, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, or generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute extremism and may be constitutionally protected. So once again, if you are a person out there just expressing your thoughts, literally your thoughts on how you believe the government to be fucked up for its mistreatment of black people historically all the way up to the modern day, the government is trying to say in this report that you are possibly a threat to law enforcement, which is at the end, the bigger picture, of course, white supremacy, for just even thinking that way. But then they go on to admit your thoughts may be constitutionally protected. Anyway, let's go. It says scope note. The intelligence assessment focuses on individuals with BIE ideological motivations who have committed targeted, premeditated attacks against law enforcement officers since 2014. So we're only talking 3 years here. This assessment does not address BIEs who have attacked law enforcement officers during the course of officers' routine duties, such as responding to calls and traffic stops, in which violent actions were reactionary in nature. The assessment addresses the following key intelligence questions. To what extent are BIEs targeting interests retaliatory? What cross-programmatic relationships influence the BIE movement? This assessment is the first FBI analytic intelligence product to assess influences between the sovereign citizen extremist movement and the black identity extremist movement. The hell is the black identity extremist movement or the sovereign citizen extremist? Whatever. The FBI has previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in 2 products, both of which had findings consistent with the assessment. The March 23rd, 2016 FBI intelligence bulletin titled, here's the title, it's pretty damn long now, Black Separatist Extremists Call for Retaliation in Response to Police-Involved Incidents Could Incite Acts of Violence Against Law Enforcement. That is the actual title of a damn bulletin they put out. And they're saying that this bulletin assessed incidents involving allegations of law enforcement abuse and related legal proceedings would likely lead to BSE calls for violent retaliation and incite these domestic extremists to commit violent acts against law enforcement. The November 14th, 2014 FBI intelligence bulletin titled, this one's titled Potential Criminal Reactions to Missouri Grand Jury Announcement. So they're saying this bulletin assessed the announcement of the grand jury's decision in the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson would likely be exploited by some individuals to justify threats and attacks against law enforcement and critical infrastructure. So pretty much they're saying all that shit that went down in Ferguson with the protests, with Michael Brown getting shot, the protests, and the cop getting off or not being indicted by the grand jury was enough for cops to believe that you niggas would get out there and start killing cops or attacking cops. Just that was enough for them to go on panic mode. Man, I look forward to the memo that's going to come out in response to this Las Vegas shooter who shot up 50 something people. I wonder what they're going to say about him. All right, then we got this little yellow box down here. This thing says, reporting in this intelligence assessment was derived primarily from FBI and law enforcement investigation and open source reporting, media interviews of subjects posting on social media accounts and online news articles deemed credible and reliable. So they're basically out there watching your social media feeds. All you super duper pro black Negroes out there talking that bliggity black stuff. The law enforcement is watching you. Shit, they all know, they know who you are already. So they're just keeping an eye on you to make sure to see if you turn into the next Micah X. I believe that was the dude's name. I think they actually mentioned him in this bulletin as well. Where was I at? The review of the FBI investigations occurred between September 2014 and December 2016. The open source reporting was current as of January 17th, 2017. Statements made by the subjects to law enforcement during the course of investigations were particularly helpful to identify motivations behind BIE attacks against law enforcement because ideological motivations are infrequently identified or collected. Additional reporting on the ideological motivations behind BIE attacks would improve the confidence levels in this assessment. So pretty much the more you niggas keep talking, the more they're going to keep gathering information on you and forming this little profile about you and then coming up with their little arty smarty methods of determining whether or not you're going to go out there and do some shit to the cops. That's pretty much all that's saying. All right, then we go on to this part. Suspects. This portion is titled "Suspects' Grievances Very Likely Lead to Violent Targeting of Law Enforcement." It says the FBI judges, it is very likely BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans have become organizing drivers for the BIE movement since 2014, resulting in a spike of BIEs intentionally targeting law enforcement with violence. Now listen to this part. In all 6 targeted attacks since 2014. So the FBI is basing this off of 6 attacks from black people onto cops. 6, not 60, not 600, not 6,000, nigga. 6. 6, nigga. 6. How many damn black people have been harmed or killed by the cops since 2014? Hell, how many have been harmed or killed in 2017 just this year alone by the cops? I need to run the Sean King's Twitter feed and get the actual number, but I want to say it's in the hundreds already. But they're talking about 6. This whole report is based off of 6 incidents. Anyways, let me get back to reading. It says in all 6 targeted attacks since 2014, the FBI assesses it is very likely the BIE suspects acted in retaliation for perceived past police brutality incidents. Even though 5 of these attacks occurred following controversial police shootings of African Americans by white police officers, BIE targeting of officers was not in every incident based on their specific race. Goes on to say on July 7th, 2016, Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas, during a First Amendment protected protest before being ultimately killed by police. The 5 deceased officers were white. The planned public event was protesting recent officer involved shootings of African Americans in Louisiana and Minnesota. Based on Johnson's journal writings and statements to police, he appeared to have been influenced by BIE ideology. So they're saying Micah Johnson, the guy who shot up them cops in Dallas back last year, was influenced by all these pro-black people speaking that pro-black shit all over the internet. That's what they're saying. He was sitting there observing, sitting there soaking up all this knowledge in